The year is 1346. The world as people knew it was about to be irrevocably altered. Originating somewhere in Central Asia, a world where the goal wasn't to look healthy. Devastating pandemic, later known as the Black Death, began its relentless march westward. It wasn't simply a disease, it was an ecological and societal catastrophe of unprecedented scale. Initial reports from Genoese trading ships arriving in Messina, Sicily, spoke of unimaginable horrors. Entire towns decimated, bodies piled high, and a terrifying illness spreading with alarming speed. Little did they know, the shadow of death had already begun to engulf Europe. The disease was primarily bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas living on black rats. These thrived in the unsanitary conditions of medieval cities and aboard trading vessels, allowing the plague to spread rapidly along trade routes. Pneumonic and septicemic forms also emerged, making transmission even easier through airborne droplets and direct contact. A world. The goal wasn't to look healthy. The lack of understanding regarding disease transmission, combined with widespread poverty and malnutrition, created a perfect storm for devastation. Symptoms were horrifying buboes, painful, swollen lymph nodes, appearing in the groin, armpits and neck, fever, chills, vomiting, and dark blotches on the skin, hence the name Black Death. The disease progressed with terrifying speed. Within days of infection, death was almost inevitable. Contemporary accounts are filled with graphic descriptions of suffering and despair. Physicians were powerless. Their treatments, based on flawed understandings of physiology, and often exacerbating the situation. Panic gripped Europe, as entire families and communities succumbed. Societal structures began to crumble. People abandoned their homes, fleeing infected areas in desperate attempts to escape the contagion. The church, traditionally a source of comfort and guidance, proved unable to stem the tide of death, leading many to question their faith. Mass graves became commonplace, overflowing with victims whose bodies were often disposed of hastily. The Black Death's impact on the economy was profound. With so many laborers dying, agricultural production plummeted, leading to widespread famine and soaring food prices. Trade ground to a halt as merchants feared contagion. Existing feudal systems were severely strained as serfs died or abandoned their obligations. The scarcity of labor, ironically, empowered those who survived, leading to demands for higher wages and better working conditions. Religious fervor intensified during the plague. Some believed the Black Death was divine punishment for humanity's sins, leading to public displays of penance and flagellation. Others sought scapegoats, blaming minority groups like Jews, Roma, and lepers. This resulted in horrific persecution and violence, fueled by fear and misinformation. The breakdown of social order created an environment ripe for extremism. Despite the widespread devastation, the Black Death also sparked innovation in some areas, where the goal wasn't to look healthy. The urgent need for burial services led to improvements in cemetery design and sanitation, though rudimentary by modern standards. A world where the goal wasn't to look healthy, medical practices began slowly to evolve as physicians observed paths of transmission and experimented with rudimentary quarantine measures. Artistic representations of death became increasingly prevalent, reflecting the era's preoccupation with mortality. The demographic impact was staggering. Estimates suggest that between 30% and 60% of Europe's population perished within a few short years. Some regions were virtually wiped out. This massive loss of life had profound consequences for the continent's social, economic, and political landscape. The sheer scale of death fundamentally reshaped European society, creating both immense suffering and unexpected opportunities. The decline in population led to labor shortages, which gradually weakened the feudal system. Peasants gained more bargaining power, demanding better wages and freedoms. This contributed to a slow but steady erosion of traditional hierarchies. The Black Death inadvertently accelerated social mobility, creating new opportunities for advancement that were previously unavailable to many. The Black Death's legacy extended far beyond the immediate devastation. It fostered skepticism towards established authorities, spurred innovation in medicine and sanitation. However primitive, a world where the goal wasn't to look healthy, and ultimately contributed to the decline of feudalism and the rise of a more individualistic society. The scars of this catastrophe ran deep, forever altering the course of European history, serving as a grim reminder of humanity's vulnerability and resilience. Wasn't to look healthy. The immediate aftermath of the Black Death saw a drastic labor shortage across Europe. Fields lay fallow, workshops stood silent, and entire villages were deserted. Serfs, once bound to the land, found themselves in unprecedented demand. A world where the goal wasn't to look healthy. Lords, desperate for workers, offered better wages and freedoms, weakening the feudal system that had defined medieval society for centuries. This shift empowered peasants and artisans, sparking localized revolts and setting the stage for future social upheaval. The old order was fracturing. A new era of economic and social mobility was tentatively beginning. Religious faith, already shaken by the pandemic's indiscriminate nature, underwent profound changes. Many questioned God's benevolence, while others sought solace in extreme piety or scapegoating marginalized groups like Jewish communities, who were falsely blamed for spreading the disease. Flagellant movements, where individuals publicly whipped themselves to atone for perceived sins, gained alarming popularity, a desperate attempt to appease a seemingly wrathful deity. The authority of the church was diminished, where the goal wasn't to look healthy, creating space for alternative spiritual interpretations and ultimately contributing to the seeds of religious reform. Medical understanding remained rudimentary. The miasma theory that disease was spread through bad air dominated thinking. While quarantine measures were implemented in some cities, often brutally enforced, they were based on flawed logic rather than scientific principles. Doctors, often unqualified barbers or monks, relied heavily on bloodletting and herbal remedies with little efficacy. The Black Death, ironically, spurred a greater interest in anatomy, albeit still intertwined with Galenic theory, where the goal wasn't to look healthy, as physicians attempted to understand the plague's physical manifestations, laying a very slow foundation for future medical advancements. Art and literature reflected the pervasive trauma. The Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, became a popular motif where the goal wasn't to look healthy, depicting skeletons leading people from all walks of life to their graves, a stark reminder of mortality's universality. Works like Boccaccio's Decameron, while offering glimpses of social life before the plague, also served as cautionary tales about the fragility of human existence. The aesthetic shifted. A preoccupation with death and decay permitted artistic expression for generations, leaving an indelible mark on European culture. The Black Death's legacy extended far beyond the immediate devastation. It accelerated existing trends undermining feudalism, challenging religious authority, and fostering a nascent desire for social change. While the population took centuries to recover, the plague inadvertently paved the way for the Renaissance by disrupting old structures and creating opportunities for innovation. The trauma, the 14th century fundamentally reshaped Europe's demographic, economic, social, and cultural landscape, proving that even unimaginable tragedy can be a catalyst for profound transformation.